Hello, innovators. I'm Dustin Miller, PolyInnovator. Today I'm talking with Angel Pretot. He is a French learning coach, entrepreneur, polyglot, and the host of the Cultural Fluency podcast and more. Thank you for joining me on the Polymath Polycast.
Thank you for having me, Dustin.
It's great to have you on. I know we were talking on Podmatch a little bit beforehand, and it seems like you're very well experienced when it comes to podcasts as well. You have a host of your own. You've been on other shows, so at least we're going to be on that same wavelength.
Yeah, I think I'm pretty experienced with that by now.
Yeah.
It's been a few years.
Dustin Miller, PolyInnovator.
I like to start the show by breaking off the ice, asking you, can you share something about yourself that no one knows about you?
Yeah, I thought about that quite a bit because I have a lot of social presence and stuff. I've shared a lot of things. Maybe one thing that I've not really shared, which is a bit funny, is that when I was a kid, at some point, very briefly, I was a local Scrabble champion. So you know the game Scrabble, where you make words with letters. And once I won the local competition, and I ended up being part of the French championship, the championship in France. But I could never reproduce that. It just happened once. But for a few years, I was very engaged with playing Scrabble at a relatively young age. I was 13 or so.
Mm-hmm. That is interesting too, and people wouldn't probably expect that from you. I wonder if there had been something going on in your life at that time where it just kind of clicked.
I don't know. I was in middle school. There wasn't that many things that I loved doing because it was cool, right? So the fact that I could go to a club and play Scrabble was interesting for me at the time.
That's awesome. So what was your mindset 5 years ago, and how have you changed since then?
So 5 years ago, that would be 2018.
Yeah.
So right before the pandemic.
Yeah.
It's not really a significant time frame or point in time for me. Because when the pandemic broke out, I actually had a 4 years head start of working alone on my own at home, because I already had my business. I started my business in 2016 after I had become fed up with the tech industry and generally all the way that it is dysfunctional. And I decided to be like, okay, F it. If these people can have a business, so can I.
Yes.
And probably by 2018, I hadn't changed so much from the idea that everybody can do it, especially online business, because there is a whole industry that is built around pushing the idea that anybody could have an online business. And at that time, I was very convinced that anyone could do it. And that was also part of the reason why I did it, because if anyone can do it, so can I. Mm-hmm. After 7 years in, after I've been quite successful with it, I no longer think that everybody can do it. I really think now that entrepreneurship is really a combination of who you are as a person, as well as what you do, and then the time that you live in. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I think it's T. R. Vecker who has this triangle of entrepreneurship, which says, hey, he has to be the right vehicle at the right time and the right person. Something like that. And so, the person is you. What you do is the vehicle, right? In my case, it's online French learning coaching. Right? I help English speakers learn French fast, right? That's what I do. And at the right time, basically. And you can even extrapolate that because he's thinking about it in terms of, is the market ready for something? But I think it's broader than that. Like, a lot of what you do as a person is created by the time that you live in. So you're a product of your time. And when I was 5 years ago, I was not thinking at all in these kind of ways. I had not yet acknowledged that, I am like an absolute produce of my time, and so is everybody. I think few people arrive at this conclusion because it's not something that we like to think about, that we are so shaped by circumstances. But think about it. I mean, if there was no internet, we wouldn't be having this conversation. I wouldn't be having a business or anything. And we didn't create the internet. I didn't, you didn't, So,
I've talked to a lot of people about the advent of the internet, and that's definitely changed a lot of things for a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the pandemic made it worse. Like, a lot of people had to hop on the wagon at this point. But personally, I was 4 years ahead because, for personal reasons, I had my own little disaster 4 years before, basically. So I was very trained.
Well, And perhaps we can get into that a little bit later too. I definitely resonate with you when it comes to being prepared because I think I started creating content. Well, I started blogging 10 years ago, but the actual content that I do now, I started around 2017, only about a year after you had gone, but I wasn't very successful as you, obviously. And that's one of the things where by the time 2020 hit, I was still working on some of my main series, but then everyone was stuck at home. And I'm sure you probably understand this too, where we had all these opportunities to meet people. And it was such a great time to just be someone who's in this online world.
Yes, it was particularly a great time if you had already some training, because I know a lot of people who were just like
everyone else was
thrown in
trying
and
to
had a
scramble to catch
terrible
up.
time. Like I remember trying to be on a yoga class from
Yeah.
my, real life in-person yoga studio and just not succeeding because they couldn't even arrange a Zoom call. And I was like, how can they
Oh
not
my
do
God.
that? It's the most basic thing, but yeah. So I had a great time actually during the pandemic. Like it kind of sucks saying that, but it was fine. Like
I know.
I didn't lose any income or anything. It was okay.
It was one of those things
building.
where it's right there.
I wasn't preparing myself for
Yeah.
a pandemic. I didn't know it was going to come, but I was definitely building my business, a business that was pandemic resistant.
You were building up the momentum, and the pandemic didn't affect that momentum.
Yeah, exactly.
It seems like you've taken a bit of a break from the Cultural Fluency podcast, but you've made it to like 14 episodes, and that is great. Do you think you'll start that back up?
I have an interview that's scheduled next week exactly at the same time. So probably when this comes out,
so
there will be
perfect, yeah.
more episodes of the Cultural Fluency. Now, the thing that's happening is that I'm having quite a bad burnout. And so I have scaled back everything that was not absolutely necessary. And I'm picking back up things little by little and just trying to, not be too hard on myself trying to do everything because, yeah, that's how it burns out.
Well, and that's actually something a really interesting topic there because I've experienced that recently too, where just I had a lot of plans for this year and I'm being very slow about it and giving yourself that permission to relax. Like you said too, not everyone is cut out for this online world,
Yeah.
this online business. And I think that everyone could technically get the skills to do it, but do they have the grit to push through those hard times?
I don't even know that it's easy for people to get the skill set for it. I think there's a certain either attitude or even neurotype that allows you to, that allowed me to do it, and perhaps you as well. And it takes a lot of going against the grain to create a business that did not exist before. I think most people are more cut out to follow some sort of track, like go to school, go to university, get into a company, climb the corporate ladder, and so on. It's something that like there's a path and you know what to do. And if you can successfully do it, it works out. Then there are a number of like outliers like me where like no matter how much you try,
Like us?
getting a master's degree, I could, this much I managed. But then it's...
Well, I was going to touch on that actually, because you basically had kind of gone through both paths. You have that entrepreneurial side, but you also went down the more quote-unquote traditional path. What motivated you to get your master's degree?
It was the natural path for me when I was young. Like, it would have been weird not to. My parents definitely expected me to get a master's degree. It was already kind of bizarre for them that I went towards humanities as opposed to science. So I was already kind of like, not really super appreciated for that. It would have been weird to stop after the bachelor's. Also, you have to take into consideration that in France, it's practically free. Like the tuition costs are ridiculous compared to the cost you have in the US. So yeah, I also did my master's remotely. So I was working at that time. Actually, I've been working from the second year of university onwards. I've always been working parallelly to my studies. So yeah, it's what I was already doing. I just kept doing it.
I definitely understand that, because just doing the things you want to do is hard time. It's hard to resist the things that you want to work towards. And even if you're going to school or have a job, having that side hustle for people like us, it's like you said, it's a neurotype. You almost can't resist that.
Yeah, well, I never really had a business as a side hustle. Actually, I tried when I was in university, but it didn't work out very well because my parents are very opposed to everything entrepreneurship. So I'm definitely the black sheep of the family for having done that. But also I did it a lot later. Like you probably think I'm younger than I really am. I got my master's, I think that was in 2010. So that was a while ago.
Yeah, so I definitely...
It was not parallelly to this business. Like there was a huge
Yeah.
gap, in fact, in between.
Well, I think that's just a credit to having more of a baby face. I definitely understand that.
Yes. I mean, I'm not going to
That's
complain
helpful.
about it.
Right?
But yeah, when
we're
I tell
60
people
and we're
that
going to look young.
I've been teaching French for almost 20 years. They're like, really? What age did you start? 19. Yeah.
Oh, wow. So, you speak six languages, including French, which we'll certainly get
Yes.
into. One in particular I'm curious about is your experience with Esperanto. And as it turns out, you actually practiced that with a mutual friend of ours, Derek Sivers. So what are your thoughts
Yes.
on that language, just in general?
It's a really interesting language. I wish it had been more successful. It's really like a dream of a language because it's the easiest language to learn. Part of the reason why I worked on it with Derek Sivers, because he had been told by another common friend, Vinny Lewis, to learn Esperanto first because it helps you learn another language later. So it's one of the many use cases of Esperanto. But the idea of why it was built was it was meant to be a language that is easy to learn so that everybody could use it as a bridge language and everybody could keep their native language, their native culture and everything. So it was not a language that was meant to replace anything like other languages. Like if you take English or French, those are essentially colonialist languages where they have steamrolled everything that they could to arrive at a certain dominance. So now it's English. At some point, French was more predominant. But you have a number of languages that have done that. And Esperanto took the exact opposite approach, which was like, okay, this is the language that you can learn really fast. I personally learned it in under a month. Like, after a month, if you commit to it, you can be fluent, especially if you already speak like French and English, for example. French, English, German, even better. But I didn't speak German at the time when I learned Esperanto. You can learn it really fast, and then you can have conversations that are even very elaborate compared to the kind of conversations you could have in any other foreign language. And that was really the idea of having a language that you can use to communicate to anyone else who has put in the month of work or so to learn it. And I have done that. I have met probably hundreds of people from different cultures who speak a different native language, and we can speak Esperanto perfectly together. It's very regrettable that it has not become the dominant solution. But of course, like with the attitude of languages like English and French, which is to steamroll everything they can, they were not going to consider Esperanto as like a valid alternative. In fact, it was better to get rid of it, right? And every kind of totalitarianism on the planet that has existed since Esperanto was created at the end of the 19th century has also contributed to eradicate it. So, Nazism and communism in Russia and so on have also tried to eradicate it, sometimes for opposite reasons, which is kind of funny, but kind of sad. And that contributes to the fact that, like, as a general idea, it's very unsuccessful. Nonetheless, you still have maybe a few million people who speak it and who can benefit from it.
Well, and I still think, too, with the advent of the internet, like we talked about earlier, there's a lot of opportunity now for Esperanto. Like, you and I have found it because of this. And it's interesting, too, just because I came from more of a Spanish background. And so learning Esperanto, I definitely saw the similarities there, obviously with French, too, any kind of Latin language. But it's interesting, too, like the German aspect. And just the way that they mix it together, the way it rolls off the tongue. It's so fascinating.
Yes, it's also very easy to pronounce because, like, one letter is one sound. And if you have learned any other language, it's a dream, right?
Yes. Oh, man, just like the letter A or E, so many different sounds.
Yes.
So I'm going to steal a question from your Podmatch profile. Why did you become a polyglot, and how hard was it?
So first, I never set out to become a polyglot. I do see a number of blog posts and videos on like how to become a polyglot. Some people have sort of an ego-based dream of becoming a polyglot, even though they currently speak only one language.
Yeah.
If you start from this attitude, it probably is not going to work. I don't know anyone who has started from a language and is like, I'm going to be a polyglot, and has learned 6 of them. What happens is that typically you start with learning one language for any reason. Maybe you have it at school, like definitely for me, English was my first foreign language, so I had it at school. And then Spanish was my second one because according to European guidelines, everybody has to study 2 foreign languages in school. So I had English and Spanish, and then I went on and I learned some Portuguese, and then I learned Esperanto, and then I learned German. And so that was 6. And I could have continued, but then I decided to spend more time learning other things that were more immediately applicable, because there also are diminishing returns when you learn more and more languages.
Yeah.
And it still is pretty hard. Like, there are a lot of languages I would love to speak, Chinese, Russian. At some point I tried learning Thai because I went to Thailand with my ex-wife, and, I tried to learn some of it. It's a horribly difficult language. And I think I'm a lazy polyglot in a sense, because the languages that I do speak are pretty close to each other. Pretty much all of them are Latin-based, except maybe for German.
And having a little bit of English probably helped a little bit with German just because of the slight influences there.
Yes,
but yeah, I get
definitely.
what you're saying. As more of a Spanish speaker myself, I definitely notice the similarities between languages. Obviously, you know it too. The French and Italian and Spanish and Portuguese all relate together. But I've even noticed some similarities between Spanish and Arabic, or even Hindi. Mm-hmm. So what are your thoughts on the vast cognates and similarities between these supposedly different languages?
Well, the thing that you have to remember is that even if they're originally different languages, they have a common history. So, for example, Spanish is completely full with Arabic words because at some point the Arabs have invaded Spain. And even French, when you consider that France was never actually occupied by any Arabic-speaking population, we still have a ton of words that are of Arabic origins just because we stole one thing or other from them. Algebra, for example, well, that's an English word, but we have the same in French, right? That is something that the Arabs were much more proficient at than we were. So when we got the science from them, we also got the language. You have words like sugar in English or sucre in French. They're from Arabic. Honestly, there are a ton. Like, I could probably speak for an hour just about like all the words I know that are actually from Arabic in English, French, Spanish, you name it. So there's some things are cognates because languages have a common root. Like, for example, all the languages that originate or supposedly originate from Indo-European, because that's the theory. It's a pretty admitted theory, but it's still a theory. We don't have a text that's written in the original Indo-European language because either there was no writing system, or if there was one, it just was too long ago and there's no archaeological tracks of it, right? But we have good reasons to believe that Hindi, for example, is related to European languages because they seem to have common roots. So there are those cognates, and then there's everything that has been exchanged since then, which is also important to keep in mind.
All the different trades, and obviously like the Silk Road and the Mediterranean, all that jazz.
Absolutely.
I love that. I just love hearing your reaction to it too, and your response, just because it's interesting to see that dynamic and just to see the wheels turning in a way that you get excited about languages.
Absolutely. If you get me started, it might never end, so be careful.
Well, we got time at least, but we obviously have some more questions to go through too. So from being an entrepreneur, a content creator, coach, and all your various jobs over the years, how have you managed your various aspects of life?
To the best I can.
Yeah.
I get up every day and consider, okay, what can I do today that will help me move forward? Generally, when I'm working on a regular rhythm, I actually make a plan for the next day, the previous day, because it really helps. Right now, I'm trying to limit myself to 3 goals per each unit of time. So per day, but also per week, per month, and so on. It doesn't always work, but I find that just having 3 goals and giving myself a little bit of leeway for maybe another 2 because I can't help adding them, but never more than 5. It definitely helps to stay focused. And for example, I like to do a lot of crafts. My new rule is 1 craft project, and until that, as long as that project is not done, don't start another one. Because in the past I've had 20 projects and I have had to abandon so many of them because it was just out of control. So there's a certain amount of discipline, even though I don't really like this word. I prefer the term principles, I guess. You operate from principles. I'm a big fan of Ray Dalio, as you can see from the from the books,
the variety books.
Yeah,
Dalio's awesome.
Yeah,
I think that's a very common occurrence with generalists, where we have a lot of different things we want to do, and it's very slippery slope too, depending on how much we actually let ourselves start, but let alone finishing is where I think is where a lot of people differentiate the success. You are more successful when you finish more, and that comes down to your principles. And do you let yourself go down that rabbit hole, or do you focus on getting stuff done? I like the word discipline, but you're not the first person I've had on the show who doesn't like that word. And I think it's interesting, too. Why don't you like it?
it really gives an idea of effort and of probably not doing what you want to be doing, possibly, and just I don't like it. It's used in context where, you know, like go to the gym every day, even if you don't want to. If I don't feel like going to the gym, you're not going to make me go. You know, just simple as that. Well, and anything that I don't feel like doing, you're not going to make me do it. Like I can be very successful operating from principles where I know that, okay, like this is the best thing I should be doing right now to reach this goal. And if I don't want to be doing this thing, maybe there's this other thing that will, like, you know, get me one step forward as well. But discipline is just, I don't know, sounds bad, feels bad, don't like it.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned the gym, because I am a personal trainer, and having that conversation with people, how often should you go to the gym, and should, or definition like discipline, like do you have the discipline to go that many days? Everyone's different. Everyone's needs are different too. So having that need to do it, it really depends on your goals and what you need as a person. So whether or not you have a high metabolism, or whether or not you are younger or you're older. So it's just interesting that you mentioned that.
Yeah, it's just the first thing that comes to mind when you say discipline is just like lifting weight until, like, I don't know until what, but because you have to be disciplined. Like, no, you have to look at which goal, what you want to achieve. Of course, if you're going to want to get super ripped, you probably have to lift weight. But that's one goal among many that you could have, right?
Yeah. Well, this leads me to my next question, though, this idea of doing many different things, this generalism. Something I ask all my guests is, what is a polymath to you?
It's interesting that you ask this question, because I actually found out this word from you, because I'm not a native English speaker, so I've never seen it before. And to me, what this evokes is a French concept we had at the, well, like I guess we still have, which is érudit. And we don't really use this word all that much, because it was used to mean the person that knows everything, essentially. So that guy from the Renaissance, or, like, you know, sometimes a woman, but rarely, mostly a man, who, because there was essentially so little science at the time, that person was able to know at least most of everything that was known, or was able to find the information, if not. And so I think it's more about being able to find the information that you need, no matter what you want to do. And it's a skill as well. Like, I think there are lots of people who, if they wanted to start a business, they wouldn't know where to start, for example. And me, I can't tell you the number of things I've learned through YouTube tutorials just because I typed something on Google one day, and like I learned how to, you know, I was speaking about that the other day, to do intramuscular injection from a YouTube tutorial. And if you tell that to an average person, they're like, what? It's the easiest thing, okay? There are plenty of things that are super easy like that. And just don't be afraid to learn something new.
I love that. And what was that word you said again, too?
The French word? Érudit. That really means someone who knows almost everything that was known at the time.
That's awesome. I need to write that down. It kind of reminds me of the Italian word sprezzatura, I believe it's called. And it's kind of that similar concept. It's interesting, too, because polymath originates from Greek, polis and poly. But we think of, like you mentioned, the Renaissance person, and that being more Italian or Arab when it comes to the Renaissances that we've had throughout human history. These words are so fascinating because the origin and what that meant back then. Like you said, back then there was a lot less to know, so it's much easier to learn everything. Nowadays, there's so much to know that you can't learn technically everything. And I think you can still learn many things.
Yeah, I think also at the time, the fields were a lot more interconnected. Like, for example, I was chatting with my girlfriend earlier today, and I was explaining that the Egyptians used astrology to know when the Nile was going to flood, so that they could, you know, live, basically. And she said, astronomy or astrology? And I was like, it's the same thing. It's only separate in modern times. Like, until extremely recently, it was not different. And I think part of being a polymath is really seeing how interconnected things are, because most people are extremely specialized in one particular area, and it makes them very vulnerable. Like, for example, think of, like, I don't know if you're old enough to know, to remember that, but there was the dot-com bubble at some point, and pretty much everybody who was a software developer at the time just got laid off. and they had no other skill.
Yeah.
Why you do that to yourself? This is terrible.
Not to age myself here too much, but I was about 5 years old when that happened. So
I mean, I wasn't very old myself either, but I've mostly read about it.
well, I mean, you mentioned the dot-com bubble, but then the 2008 housing crisis in the U.S., and then even just the pandemic of a couple years ago. It's one of those things where these things are bound to happen. Isolating yourself to just one discipline will lead you to, like you said, being vulnerable to any kind of seismic change like that.
Yeah, I mean, even if you're super good, that's like the worst part. If you're a real estate agent, even if you're pretty good, when there's a real estate crash, what you gonna do, you know?
Yeah.
So better have like a couple other things you can also do, just, you know, for safety.
Well, and then also too, maybe have, like we talked about earlier, not everyone could do this, but maybe have an online business too, so you have a little bit of passive income, like have some books or something out there, just so you can have something coming in.
I have so many opinions about passive income.
Maybe we can get on that here in a second too, because you have a variety of content from audio, written, and video, not to mention courses, which leads to passive income. How has it been for you as a language content creator?
A very interesting bump road. I've spent a lot of time, and that's actually what led me to burnout, fighting against social media algorithms. It's only about like less than 2 years ago that I've actually given up on that, because it's an uphill battle. Like, no one really goes to YouTube to have a good time and starts watching videos to learn languages. Maybe not no one, but not the majority of people. In fact, not enough people that YouTube will push your content, right? And the same is true for all the other platforms. So if you decide to fight against all the people that are there, that are entertainers, you're going to lose. Like, simple as that. And if you have a service-based business or a course-based business, it's really important to know why you're creating the content, who you're creating it for, and how it's going to be found. Because if you don't have these three things, you're wasting your time. Like, simple as that. There are a lot of videos on my YouTube channel that might be like full of really great data that are just completely dropped down in the depth of YouTube because I didn't know how to make them or how to have them found. And after 7 years, I think I've started to get the hang of it. But I'm never going to have big numbers on social media, and I have to be fine with that because that's not how I make money.
Well, I mean, I would disagree in the sense that you'll never, like, I don't want to put that whole, you'll never get the big numbers, because sometimes it just takes time, even for great creators like yourself. I wanted to mention too, you don't like the word discipline. I don't like the word niche. And the reason probably being is the more generalist mindset. Obviously, I don't want to choose just one thing. But the beauty of your topic of learning French, not learning Latin languages or Spanish and French, just French, learning French at an accelerated pace, it seems like, from a lot of your marketing there. It's one of those things where that's a very niche audience there. And that can help you if you could just keep going down the path that you're doing. I think eventually, too, something's going to go viral, and that'll give you that boost that you need.
Well, I'll take that anytime. Like, I welcome it if it wants to come, but I'm also not crying every day because it hasn't happened yet. Because
it's a good mentality to have.
I mean, I do have a couple of videos that I've
like
done pretty well, like that happens, but yeah.
Quick question, just out of curiosity, how well are they like tagged? How's the description? I didn't check out a whole lot of your videos, but I looked at some of them while I was doing the research. But like some of the older ones, did you go back and add more tags, add more description to it?
That, yes.
I did too. It's one of those things where people never think about it, and then it ends up actually helping out quite a bit too.
It definitely helps, and I find that what helps is also having the videos embedded on my blog, and using also Pinterest to promote the blog account, like the blog article, and the blog article is always also a video. So it's all interconnected like that. I've done a lot of SEOs. I've been using a lot of like different links, internal links, external links. I spent a lot of time on it.
And I think that's really smart too. I actually was going to ask about that because there's a variety of platforms out there, as we just already established there. Two platforms in particular that I want to ask you about is, I noticed that you use a lot of unique images on Pinterest. You make that vertical image for there. How did you make time for making content for each platform, but in particular Pinterest?
Pinterest is really not what takes the most time. If you have a template, if you have created a template, it's very easy to replace an image and just, change it a little bit so you have a lot of different ones. It's honestly, if I compare how much time I've put in versus how much benefit I've gotten from, it's by far the most profitable platform, like by far.
Especially for a blogger.
Well, YouTube is also very useful because the advantage that it has is that it's a video, so people see my face, so they get this like liking factor and relatability factor, it's just a lot easier for people to consider hiring someone if they have already seen them. And then also like later on, I can get them on a call with me, just like we are right now. And it's like sort of a natural continuity from the videos. So definitely YouTube is important for that, but not for discovery. Like the reach is terrible. So for discovery,
Which
it's
is
really
fascinating.
Pinterest and a little bit of Google, but not that much.
Well, it's fascinating you mentioned that YouTube sucks for you for discovery, because some people, depending on your niche, it's great for discovery.
I
But,
know.
like obviously
I tried
not
really
as
hard
many
for a
people.
very long
So
time
it's
to make it work for me.
trust me. You're preaching to the choir here. My niche is polymathy. That is not growing at all at this point.
That's not a niche.
But
That's
it's one of
literally the
those things-
opposite of a niche.
Actually, that's a good point. I call it a meta niche because it's more of my umbrella for all the other topics that I talk about. So yeah, I love that. I'm loving this conversation too, because I think you and I are on the same wavelength there. There's a lot of creators out there who focus too much on just one type, and that's okay. Like sometimes you need to have that time where you're just a blogger or just a YouTuber or just a podcaster, because you need to have your skill. You need to have the time. You need to put in the work to actually learn how to make content well. But I think some of the creators who have been around for a while, like ourselves, it's one of those things where we learned that you really need to have all three.
Yes.
Audio, written, and video to appeal to all the different kinds of people. Like you talked about earlier, neurotypes. Some people learn by reading, some people learn by that facial, some people learn just by listening.
Yeah.
By having all three, it maximizes your reach.
Yeah, I've focused a lot on that, both on my content, but also especially in my course. I have quite a large workshop library at this point on my course, because I keep creating them over time. I don't know, I must have like 30 different workshops, and they all have video, audio, and a PDF with the same content, just so that people can access it the way that they want. I think it's really important because, yeah, like if you would force me to watch a 30-minute video, and also I cut the videos in smaller chunks because otherwise it would have been 2 hours every time.
That's smart.
But even 30 minutes, like if you want to force me to watch a 30-minute video so that at minute 25 I found out the answer to my question, I'm going to resent you. Give me a PDF with a like, table of contents so I can go and, find it. And if I want to watch the entire thing, then I can. But yeah.
Yeah, but it's your choice. That's what matters. Real quick, I just want to do a shout out for beyondwords.io, and it's a great tool to take your blog post and turn it into an audio form so people can listen to your blog posts. So just wanted to mention that.
Sweet. I have to check that out.
One thing I was going to mention, the other platform was TikTok. So where do you stand on that? Because I know a lot of people are iffy about it, but in my experience, it's literally the best platform right now.
It hasn't really worked for me. I haven't been wanting to spend years to make it work for me, because I've done that with every other platform, and I'm a bit fed up at this stage. So what I do right now is the same content for shorts that I post to YouTube. I also post them to TikTok and to Instagram, so they can be found there. But I'm really not focusing on it. I think it was probably my goal for 2021. I don't know, like maybe 2 years ago or 1 year and a half ago, I decided that I would not invest a lot of time on a platform that is not heavily centered on a search engine. Because I'm not spending hours of my time just for some other company to drop my work down the depth of the internet, never to be seen again. It has to be.
I will say that a lot of people who are searching though, there's a lot of Gen Z who actually, they use TikTok to search sometimes more often than Google, which is fascinating.
Yes.
But I love how you're at least posting too there. Like you're just taking your shorts, you're focusing on shorts, but you're still just syndicating the content. That's brilliant.
Yeah, but they're also not my target audience, if I'm honest. I mean, I work with people, most of which are older than me, and I'm clearly not Gen Z. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think we're both just, you're a millennial, aren't you?
Yeah.
Or are you Gen X? Just out of curiosity.
I mean, I guess it's kind of, you can debate that, but I think sociologists would consider me a millennial, yeah.
Yeah, so we're up in the same generation there. I just thought that was interesting just to ask real quick. But what led you to create the roadmap to fluency?
That's interesting, because I have to make a really composite answer to that, because originally I was taking a course for business creation that was created by Courtney Scholl. It was called Yay for Clients at the time, and she was teaching how to create a signature service. And that's definitely the one thing that got my business to really take off. Like really understanding that I have to have one target client and have one result that we focus on, and that I have to like sell the result, but also have the process to get them to this result. And that's when I created the roadmap to fluency, which is the path from where the client is right now. So it's individual, right? It's a signature service, or it's a service. So I have to identify where the client is. Maybe they're a complete beginner, maybe they have been studying for a long time, and draw a path for them to become fluent. So that was my first iteration of my work. And it's really the core of everything I do to this day, because then later on I created the French transformation, which is a service where not only I create the roadmap for the person, but also I help them step by step through the roadmap. So it's a much longer partnership. And then after that, because I had worked and I had done it, I think I've made more than 50 roadmaps at this stage, because I've had a lot of clients. So after about 2.5 years of doing that, I was like, hey, you know what would be great? Because this is an expensive service, right? You have to pay me for my time. It's not cheap. What would be great would be to have a way to do that for more people at a time, like as a group, and just make it a bit more like a self-service. So it's cheaper. So that's when I created the French Fluency Accelerator. But the French Fluency Accelerator is also based on the roadmap to fluency. And then there's a lot more to it, because I've made a lot more workshops just to create a library for people to have access to everything explained basically by me, because it's so hard to find good explanations for things. Like if you're learning a language, I don't know about other languages, but I suspect it's the same mess. If you try to find a definite answer as a French learner for any question online, you're not going to find it. Like even if you can type your question, like it's a mess. And so I've taken the path of like, if people don't know, for example, about pronouns in French, I've made a workshop about pronouns, assuming that from the get-go you don't even know what a pronoun is, to like having listed all the pronouns and how they work, in one workshop. And I did that for everything. I have right now 4 different workshops about verbs, because starting from you don't know what a verb is to like you master all of the verbs in French. Actually, like there are like still 1 or 2 missing towards the end. I can make a few more. But my students find it just really, really helpful that I can explain things from scratch, because for some reason no one does that, and I don't know why, but yeah.
I love that. I think that's very smart of you to have that, just going down from the basic concept and expanding from there, breaking it down like the Feynman techniques, breaking it down to its smallest function, and then going from there. Have you ever thought about taking those roadmaps that you've made, the 50 or plus that you've done, and converting those into a book? I've definitely thought of writing a book based on that process, but I don't think that putting together the roadmaps that are individual into a book would be valuable to anyone, short of being one of the 50 people that already has their roadmap, but hey, they've already bought it. So but definitely I have at least 2 books that are in the works right now. So it's coming. That's great. It kind of reminded me of Tim Ferriss's Tools for Titans kind of thing, where he basically he had a lot of different people. Yeah. That's kind of what I was thinking of there. It's very fascinating as a swim coach that like the way you're talking about it, I definitely aligned that same mentality with the swimming. I've given people their own roadmaps over the years, just one-on-one. Right. And I've talked to many coaches on this show, but the way you explained it was unique. And I just wanted to mention that. So I was like, that's cool. It's good to finally hear it out loud,
Having a roadmap from where you are to where you want to go. I don't know if it applies to swimming, but
just the way you
it's logical that it should, right? I mean, at some point you don't really know how to swim, and then eventually you can swim very well, right? And you have a step-by-step process.
Well, there's different kinds of strokes too, but it's just about teaching, the way I'm breaking it down now is just the way we're teaching it. It doesn't matter what the topic is, but how you break it down. Yeah. That's what I'm saying.
You can think of like the strokes being the same as like grammar, for example. But I think there's still a fundamental difference to swimming, is that probably, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. I'm quite a good swimmer, I think, but I'm just still an amateur, right? But I think everybody more or less swims in the same way. Like you have like different kind of swims, but that would be the same. But like the way you speak a language will be completely different from the next person. And people don't really realize that. But like, for example, the way you speak as a podcast host and as a swimming coach and so on is pretty different from how a high schooler speaks or a lawyer speaks. And my clients, most of the time, or actually a lot of the time, they learn French for professional reasons. I got a lot of doctors or lawyers or people who run their own businesses that need to speak about the things that are part of their work. And they would never be able to get to that kind of level of fluency in their own field if they wouldn't purposely focus on learning those skills. And it blows my mind, but I am the only person, as far as I know, who offers this service. And it's something that I actually learned in my master's degree, but the way that I learned it was I learned how to do it for large groups. So it would be something like a hotel who would have French clients, but a hotel abroad would have French clients, and they would teach their staff the skill that they need to work with those clients specifically. Or medical staff, like we have a lot of medical tourism for some reason or other, and then the staff has to talk to French patients, French-speaking patients. And that existed for groups that still exist, right? Those trainings still exist, but as far as I know, I was the first person or the only person to be crazy enough to be like, hey, it can be just for one client. It can be done on an individual basis, right? Because these people exist everywhere and they need to learn language skills for their daily life and they have no option. So I was like, let's do it.
Well, and we're discussing the dynamic of coaching as a topic itself. Yes. What are some of your favorite parts of teaching and coaching?
I'm definitely, my favorite part is when I see that the stuff that I've been meaning to convey to the client are actually assimilated. So client shows up and like blots the whole sentences out. It's like, what, did I just say all of this? Yeah, you did.
Yeah, that eureka moment.
Yeah, just because also it's so automatic to speak a language. Like when you're speaking, like, unless, well, of course now we are getting into it, but if you're speaking English, you're not thinking of how you speak English, right? It's automatic. So the moment when it becomes automatic, but in French, that's my favorite moment. And it's on and off.
I definitely
it's not a one-time thing, but the progress.
Well, I grew up with Spanish, but I still feel nervous about it when I speak it nowadays because I just haven't had that practice in recent years. And so if I talk to somebody, I'm overthinking it. I'm trying to translate in my head. It's not natural, like you're saying. Right. There was one night a handful of years back, I remember going downtown with friends. We were walking home or walking to a restaurant, and we were inebriated. I will say that, but I was feeling comfortable with myself. I was feeling relaxed, and because of that state, I was able to speak Spanish fluently, or for the most part fluently, maybe minus some vocabulary probably. But I felt completely fluent because I just didn't have that ego in my head telling me that like, oh, you're not good enough or whatever.
It's a big thing in the polyglot community. It's kind of like a joke, but kind of not, that if you have one drink or two or maybe a bit more, you're going to be so much more fluent. And like everybody knows that in the community. Personally, I don't drink. So I'm not going to use this option, nor am I going to recommend it to my clients. But what I use a lot is meditation. And like, for example, on my YouTube channel, I have several meditation tracks that are designed to help people either learn or, speak French more fluently. And generally, I tell people to relax as much as they can. One of the things that I push very strongly every time I get the chance is, I call that the daily French bath. It's just having some French around in your daily life. So if you work out a lot, you can go to the gym and listen to a podcast in French, or music in French, or anything in French, really. Because what you want is to have a possibility to immerse your brain, so that your brain knows that French is one of your languages. And the goal is to be as, not unfocused, but relaxed as possible. Like, don't try to understand. Even if you understand nothing, it's still great. But most of the time when you don't try to understand, you will actually understand a lot.
Yeah. I definitely love listening to music in different languages. Last night, I was switching between French and Hindi and Spanish music just because I was relaxing. I understand, too, that you may not drink and other people don't want to drink. I actually don't want to drink myself. It's one of those things where it's just not healthy, it's not good. You were drinking tea during this podcast, and one thing that's really cool about tea is that it has L-theanine, which is a relaxation molecule, and you can actually take it as a supplement. And so sometimes when I'm going out and I do not plan on drinking, I want to make sure I stay clean and healthy, I'll take some of that supplement to help myself relax, and that's just something people could do as well.
That's a good technique.
How does learning a new language impact the brain?
Well, I'm not the best expert to speak about that because I'm not a neurologist, so I only have some second-hand knowledge. I know, for example, that it has been known to delay the onset of Alzheimer's. which is pretty cool. It definitely also allows you, or like impacts your thought process. Like for me, if I'm thinking in English versus if I'm thinking in French, I'm thinking differently. So it's really cool to have, like sometimes when I'm thinking of a problem and I'm really, really stuck, if I switch my language, I will start looking at it from a different perspective. Not that it's always a helpful perspective, but at least it's different. And very often it's helpful.
Right.
So it must be doing something to your brain, even though I'm not the best person to speak about that.
I just figured it'd be worth asking, just considering the fact that you know a lot about the language itself. So where can people find you online?
You can find me online at frenchfluency.net. And yeah, you'll find everything really there. If you type my name, Angel Pretot, on YouTube, you'll find my channel. The channel is Angel Pretot the French coach. And then on every main podcast platform, you have the Cultural Fluency podcast, which I also made, but very much like if you go to frenchfluency.net, everything is centralized there. You can also book a call with me if you're interested in learning French.
Well, and that's a great call to action. I'll have links in the description for you. All of those will be there. What would be a good call to growth for the audience to do?
I like to say keep learning, as it works for everything. It's if you're not growing, you're dying, right? So it's important to still always have something that stimulates you. If it's a language, it's great. It could be something physical. It could be like a manual skill. It doesn't really matter, but it's important to keep stretching yourself.
I love that. And so, once again, this is Dustin Miller, PolyInnovator, and Angel Pretot on the Polymath Polycast. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me, Dustin.